and welcome to my lesson. This lesson is going to be about the Code of Hammurabi, which was a code of laws from Babylon, which was one of the early civilizations in ancient Mesopotamia. And prior to this lesson, students would have learned about the Fertile Crescent, the agricultural revolution, and the earlier civilizations in Mesopotamia. So the lesson will begin with students completing a bell ringer, and they will be doing this using Padlet. I've created a Padlet, and I will first read the questions aloud to them. The questions are, what are laws? Do we need laws? Why or why not? How does the presence or absence of laws affect us as a society? So then I would pull up the Padlet and I would model for students how to use the Padlet, especially if they've never used one before or maybe it's been a while. So I would just type in my own answer. For example, what are laws? I've typed in here. Just click to add a comment. And I've said laws, when I think of them using my own schema, my background knowledge, laws are what is defined as good behavior and what is defined as bad behavior in society. So students would then answer these questions themselves. After they answer the questions, we will then discuss their responses. I will ask them to help me look for common themes in their responses. For example, were there words that appeared frequently in their responses? Was there something they all tended to agree with? Was there something they all tended to disagree with? And then we would discuss that. The goal is to kind of get them thinking about laws in their own life and why we have laws, so that when we later talk about King Hammurabi, they have that knowledge built and that schema, and they're aware of it. So after we discuss the Padlet, I will read the agenda and learning target to students so that they know what we're doing and what to expect. The learning target says, I am learning to analyze the purposes and effects of laws in Hammurabi's code to determine what I can infer about Babylonian life. As you can see, I have bolded the keywords of the learning target so that students can know exactly what we're doing. Just makes it a little more concise for them. The agenda for the day, the bell ringer using the Padlet, which we would have already done, a short YouTube video that will be a review basically about Hammurabi and Babylon. We're then going to read some excerpts from Hammurabi's Code of Laws. We're going to complete a graphic organizer while we read the excerpts, and then they'll have an exercise. So my next slide, I just have a picture right here. This is a primary source image, a picture of the code. And it is Hammurabi along with one of the Babylonian gods, because Hammurabi specifies that he believed that this god, had called on him to be the king of Babylon and to lead them. So I would just show this image to students just to introduce them to the laws and talk about this picture a little bit. So then we would watch the video, and it's a short video. It's about 4 minutes long, and as they watch the video, I will give them some focus questions just to give them something to focus on as they watch the video and to have some accountability instead of just watching the video and not really having anything to do. So there are 3 questions I would like for them to answer. 1, who is Hammurabi? 2, what was the code of Hammurabi? 3, why did Hammurabi create his code? And then I've written on here that we will be discussing these questions after the video so that students know to expect that. And I'll just play a few seconds of the video, just so you can kind of get an idea of what it's about. Alright, so as you can see, the video again, it's just a review of who Hammurabi was. He was the king of Babylon, and you may also have noticed that that same image that I had on the previous slide from that pillar stone of Hammurabi and the sun god were in the video. So that kind of provides students with an additional explanation, and they get to see that image again. So then we would discuss these questions from the video, and then after that, we will move on to actually looking at the excerpts from Hammurabi's laws. So as we read, and I'll explain this to students, we're going to analyze the purposes and effects of the laws, and we're going to make inferences about Babylonian life based off of what we're reading in the laws. And then we're going to fill out a graphic organizer to help us do this. So here are the excerpts. Hammurabi's code actually has about 282 laws, so I just picked out some laws from some of the different categories just to, kind of introduce them to the code. Obviously, we won't be able to look at all 282 laws, so this is just to kind of give them an idea of what was important to the Babylonians as far as laws and governing their people. So the code is broken down into categories, so I've done that as well. I have categories for justice, family, trade, property, and personal injuries, and each category I've just put either one or two laws on there, just so students can kind of get an idea, what they believed about family, trade, and all that. So as we read the excerpts, students are going to fill out a graphic organizer. This is what it looks like. Basically, the far left column, they're going to choose a law from the excerpts, and they're going to put the exact quote. So I will first be doing a think aloud, where I explain my thought processes as I answer these questions in the graphic organizer, and I've put an example right here. This is what I would do. First, we would look at the first law I have here under the justice category. So I've written the exact quote, and then I've talked about the purpose of the law. I would go through this with students. Basically, they're trying to figure out how to report or accuse someone of committing a crime, specifically murder. And they're trying to decide how can an accuser prove that the crime of murder actually happened. And they decided that they needed sufficient evidence to prove guilt. And then the last column, how might this have affected the people in this society? What can we infer about their society? Well, to me, I can infer that they took crimes very seriously, especially the crime of murder, because they wanted proof that the crime took place before they actually punished someone for the crime. So since they needed this proof, I infer that many Babylonians were probably scared to report crimes because of fear that they might not be able to prove the accusation. And also, the law doesn't really specify how they can prove the accusation, like what proof would be sufficient evidence. So I can infer that might have left them confused and maybe even more scared to accuse someone. So after I would do a think aloud and do an example myself, I would then want to do an example together as a class. So all the students and I working together to analyze this next law from the justice category. Here it is right here. So I would use questioning strategies like, who is the law talking about? What is the law about? We can see, it's talking about judges. Well, what about judges? And I would use those questioning techniques to help them make sense of the law and analyze it, to critically think about what it's about and what it could mean. And then, of course, we would make inferences And as students give me answers, I would type them in on the organizer. I would be sharing my screen, and this is just an example of what it might look like. So then students would work in groups of 3, and they would work to read the rest of the laws and the excerpts and fill out the graphic organizer. And after they have filled out the graphic organizer in their groups, I will ask them to share their responses, and as they share, I will ask them to share their screen because it would be a Zoom lesson because everything's virtual. And that way their classmates can have that visual, and they can also include that in their own graphic organizer. And then finally, we would finish up with an exit slip for students to practice this new knowledge that they have about the Code of Hammurabi. They will have 2 options. The first option is to draw a simple sketch of 1 or 2 of the laws from the excerpts that I gave them. Then they're going to write a brief description underneath their sketch, discussing what law or laws they chose, the purpose and effect of those laws, and make at least one inference about Babylonian life based on the law. And then second, using a template that I will provide, and I'll show that in just a minute, they will fill out a thought bubble from the perspective of King Hammurabi. So basically, they'll choose 1 or 2 laws, just like in the first choice that they can do. And as Hammurabi, they will explain his thought processes, why he wanted this law, the purpose and effect of it, and what they think he would say people would infer about Babylonians because of that law. And this is what it could look like. Picture from the stone, and then a thought bubble right here. They would just add their text, and again, it would be from Hammurabi's perspective. And this is just a template they could use. They could also, if they want to, draw thought bubbles. They don't have to use the template. And that concludes the lesson. Thank you so much for watching.